Hey, I'd like to welcome today Kurt Landwehr. He's the founder and CEO of Brand One Franchise Development. Hey, Kurt, thanks very much for taking the time to share your wisdom today.
Hey, Ken, nice to be here. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Great. What I'd like to do, Kurt, is the reason I invite you on this podcast is really to share your insight on how to find a franchise. You've been in the industry, what now, 30 years or so? Not to date you too much, but sure people are going, hey, not looking bad for being in the industry 30 years, but I know you have a wealth of knowledge and, that can benefit a lot of our listeners. So would you mind starting off sharing a little bit of highlights of your career?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ken. And with time comes wisdom, right? So, listen, as you mentioned, I've been in the franchising business for about 25 years, and I've done a lot of different things over my career. Most of that time has been spent in helping franchise organizations grow by recruiting high-quality new franchisees into their systems in a lot of different industries. I've had a specific emphasis on hair care over the last 20 plus years, and it helped some of the larger hair care companies in the U.S. Grow to where they are today. One of the things that I've also done is I was the owner, one of the owners of a brand called Rooster's Men's Grooming Centers, and we grew that to just under 100 units, and we sold that to Regis back in 2011. And along the way, I've also started a franchise development company called Brand One. And Brand One, what we do today is we work with emerging franchise companies to provide franchise growth consulting and to help emerging franchise companies, what we like to say, grow responsibly so they can be long-term successful.
Right. Well, I appreciate that feedback and letting everybody know kind of a little bit of your background and the experience you bring forward. And as I like to say that we're the young old dogs in our industry, right? So,
right. Yeah, well said.
yeah. So on that, so over the years, there's lots of individuals that I'm sure you've seen become a franchisee, and that I would say, would it be fair to say that you've actually helped probably over 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people actually enter into their own business?
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. That requires going back into the gray matter just a little bit. But I can kind of point towards about 4,000 to 5,000 individuals that either myself or my teams have helped put into the business over the last 20, 25 years. So yeah, it's been a big number.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I thought that you would be perfect for today's topic. Many of the listeners out there right now may be trying to figure out if owning a franchise business is right for them, and if so, which franchise is going to be an ideal fit for them.
Sure.
I had so many questions to ask you, so let's just jump into it if you don't mind, Kurt.
Sure.
What would you say is the first step you recommend for anyone that's considering before starting a search for a franchise?
That's a good question. And I think, Ken, to some degree, it starts with doing an honest assessment of themselves and their current situation. Evaluating things like, what are you really good at? What are you not so good at? What are some of the things you enjoy doing? What are some of the things you don't enjoy doing? Your access to capital, your risk tolerance, and really, doing a self-evaluation to, first of all, make sure that you're cut out for business ownership, because not everybody is. And number two, make sure that you believe franchising would be the right path for that individual to take.
Okay. And, with you representing companies and having your own too, there's a lot of people out there that, want to make sure they get with the right company. And sometimes, they don't know these franchise companies and how they work. Would just comment on this a little bit. Would you say that most franchise companies are really trying to find that perfect candidate for them? They're not in the process of trying to sell you and convince you to be in a business. They're actually do the opposite. They kind of push you away a little bit, make sure you're the right fit. Would you agree with that, or with the company?
Well, yeah, for the most part, some are, some aren't, and that's one of the challenges of evaluating franchises is there's over 5,000 registered franchises in the United States, and if you go online, they're all yelling pick me" through the internet, and that can be a challenging way to assess good opportunities, or really separate the good opportunities from the not so good opportunities. So it does require a thoughtful approach to to trying to, identify a franchise that ultimately is the right fit. And it really begins with what I just mentioned earlier, and that is developing, a criteria model so you can stay away from businesses that would not be a good fit for you for a variety of reasons, and gravitate towards businesses and industries that would be based on the criteria that you've established. I always tell people that write down whatever your goals are, right? Because if you've got a goal of starting a business in the new year, if you write it down, it becomes real. A goal that is not written down is just a dream, right? So write it down and put a plan of action together to make it a reality.
Yeah. And I think, you probably can agree with this, is that's why most franchises are very successful, because they're very systematic, process orientated, and basing everything on the experience and knowledge that they have. And that's what benefits the potential franchisee to be more successful. Would you agree or no?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The old saying is franchising is a chance for you to go into business for yourself, but not by yourself.
Right.
So look for franchise companies that have well-established track records of success, have well thought out systems and programs, training programs, operating systems, because those tend to be the franchise systems that produce the best results.
Yeah, that probably backs on to the question I get asked all the time, is that people ask, do I have to have experience in that particular industry, whatever industry that may be? Because there's, I don't know if you counted it up or myself, I mean, how many hundreds of industries that are actually franchising, but what do you, when you're representing the hair care or other brands that you've represented, people say, hey, do I have to have experience in this? What's your response to that?
Yeah, Ken, that's a really insightful question, because I think that's a very common misnomer for people who are new to this. And that is, a lot of people think that they have to gravitate towards businesses and industries where either their expertise lies or their area of interest lies. So, for example, if I'm a chef, then I would want to open a restaurant. Or if I like fitness, then I would want to open a health club. And those aren't necessarily correlated items, right? In fact, I always tell people, try not to blend your vocation with your hobbies, because there can be some pitfalls there. So I tell people to really look at this with an open slate. Don't come into this with an open mind. Try to avoid preconceived notions. Be an open book, because you'd be surprised at where that might take you. The number of conversations I've had with people over the years where they say, boy, this is the last business on earth I'd have ever thought of until I was introduced to it. That's a very common refrain in our business. And if you're not open-minded to considering options that you wouldn't have otherwise considered, you could be missing good opportunities.
Yeah, that's great points. I hear that from many franchisors too, that especially a lot of my clients that have actually gone in their own business is like, I never dreamed I would be in this industry before.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny how that really happened too.
So, where the journey starts and where it ends are almost always two different things.
It is too. And, speaking about that journey, there's, when you're looking at franchises and, how do you investigate a franchise, Kurt? I mean, that's a pretty detailed, loaded question I'm giving you, but if you could break it down into a simple, just for today's podcast, what would you suggest to somebody in how to investigate a franchise company?
Yeah, good question. Well, listen, Ken, as you know, good franchise companies have good development processes, right? Processes that they want to lead their candidates through to help them properly educate them on the business and help them make informed decisions. So I would look for franchise companies to basically lay out for you, the prospective franchisee, a educational process that you can follow. That, in my experience, that's the best way to evaluate a franchise. And obviously, a big part of that is taking the time to review the franchise disclosure document and all the information included in the FDD. That's an important step. But even beyond that is understanding the business model, the different components of the business, what's required from marketing and real estate and operations and training and technology. Those are all important aspects to understand. And also, maybe most importantly, two things. One, take the time to speak to the existing franchisees about their experiences in the business. And number two, meet the management team and make sure you've got a good fit from skills, values, and behavior perspective to make sure that these are the type of people that you'd actually want to go into business with. And then lastly, I would say, don't go into the process looking for reasons not to move forward with the franchise, go into it with an understanding that, hey, this is something that you're interested in, and look for reasons why this could be the right fit rather than not the right fit. Because if you're always looking for a reason not to do something, rest assured you'll find it.
Right. I agree with that too. Is you just gotta let figure out the facts and let them fall where they fall. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not,
Yeah.
it's not, right?
Yeah. And, try to take some of the emotion out of it. Right. And, and set a time frame for getting through the evaluation phase in a reasonable amount of time. Because remember, the goal for people is not to become professional franchise evaluators. The goal is to start a business to change your life, right? So do your due diligence, get through it, make a decision, and move forward with the business if that's the right one for you. One thing I've learned over the years, and you may have seen this too, is that one of the attributes of successful entrepreneurs is they're decisive and they're good decision makers. Right. And that's a skill that people who are new to this are going to have to develop. Right. And so as you evaluate opportunities, try to be decisive in your decision making.
I agree with that 100%. One of the things I get a lot of is when people are going through this process, and one of the no-nos that we have in our industry that a lot of people aren't aware of is we can't predict income for people. It's one of the things that the government puts the tape over our mouth on, unfortunately. And some people get frustrated with that because they're like, well, how do I find out? Is this franchise going to meet my financial goals? And I don't think most people are looking for a guarantee. They're just looking for a reality of what that is. So, do you have any tips with somebody on how to really kind of dig through that and find out really what potential there is when it comes to that income?
Yeah, I sure do. A couple of things. And you're right. You bring up a good point. Listen, we can't tell somebody how much money they're going to make in any business, quite frankly, because we aren't going to be operating the business for them. They're going to be operating the business, right? And at the end of the day, entrepreneurship and business ownership is mostly about personal responsibility and the unique skills that someone brings to this relationship that are different than somebody else, right? And that produces a different result. So it's all about personal responsibility. But having said that, we do have some tools in place that help franchisees or prospective franchisees better understand the likely financial performance of any business that they're evaluating. And that is in what we call financial performance representations, which are in item 19 of the franchise disclosure document. Companies are allowed and even encouraged to provide financial disclosures to prospective franchisees. So one of the things that you should look for is, does the franchisor that you're talking to publish a financial performance representation? And if they don't, you need to ask the hard questions of why, because not only are they able to do it, the FTC encourages it. And so if they're not doing that, it would be an indication that maybe they're not doing it for a reason. Okay, so look for that in reputable franchise concepts that you're looking at. And then number two, speak to franchisees, right? The best way to understand what the likely financial performance is of the business that you're considering getting involved in is by talking to the existing franchisees who are living the business every day. And they should be able to communicate some of that to you. But again, don't base your decision to move forward on a franchise based on someone else's success, right? Because those other people aren't going to be running your business. So a lot of times people make that mistake as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Very, very good. Kurt, I like to keep these podcasts short and sweet. You and I probably talk about franchising for about 5 hours and put everybody to sleep. Sure. So I just wanted to cover some of the really important parts in getting your expertise out of it. One last question for you for today is, I have a lot of clients actually that, they're like, well, Ken, I've got a really good job right now. I'm making really good income and I'm not sure if I really want to give that up and take the hard road is what they like to say anyway. But, I shared with them that you actually have some alternatives. You don't really have to leave your position full time to get into a franchise. Now it depends on that, but what's your experience being with that?
Yeah, that it's really been one of the remarkable transformations in our industry over the last 5 to 10 years, and that is the growth of what we like to call either semi-absentee or manager-run business models that actually do allow owners to keep the safety and security of their full-time jobs if they choose to, while getting involved in a manager-run business. And then the role of the franchisee is to manage the business through their full-time managers. That can be a real viable option for people, but it really underscores the importance of making sure that you're getting involved with a strong franchisor who has technology that enables that to effectively happen. Okay, it's easy to say a franchise concept is semi-absentee or manager run. It's quite different though to do it effectively and successfully. So make sure that if the franchisor that you're talking to has that option, make sure that the technology is in place that really can facilitate that and make it happen.
Great. Yeah, that's great advice, Kurt. So, hey, Kurt, I think that's really all the topics I was hoping to cover that you could help educate the people that work with me and are potentially working with me and going through this process to see if entrepreneurship franchise is a right journey for them. So I really want to appreciate your time for spending today. And one other question I have actually is, how long and does a typical franchisee own their business? And when it comes to resale, sorry about that. I know there was one other thing on my mind I wanted to ask you.
Well, yeah, no problem.
How do they resell that company? Because that's one of the questions I actually get an awful lot is, what's the exit strategy for a business? And then I'll let you go.
Okay, no problem. Well, listen, you bring up a really important point. You know, the people I work with, I always tell them, listen, before you get involved in something, you certainly want to know how you're going to get out of it. So there should be a logical exit strategy. And so you bring up a really important point. Now, one thing that I've learned over the years is that a lot of people don't realize that you can sell your franchise business at any time. You know, people sign 10-year franchise agreements, and some mistakenly assume that they're basically wed to the business for a minimum of 10 years, and that simply is not the case. So here are the general ground rules in most franchise systems: that you are able to sell your business and monetize that investment at any time, as long as you're selling the business to a qualified buyer that would meet the qualifications that the franchisor has established to be awarded a new franchise. And number two, that they have the background and the skill set to be successful in operating the business. So the franchisor has to approve the transfer of the business from the seller to the buyer. But as long as that buyer meets the criteria, there should be no reason why a franchisor would want to prevent that sale from happening. So, okay.
Great, good answer, yeah. So, Kurt, thanks again for your time. That's it for another podcast of Learn from the Pros. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ken. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care, Kurt. Thanks again.